It should be.
I think it's live. I see the little live in the top corner.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Mental Health Monday. Jen Kohler from Alice Assistance Dogs here with our mental health consultant, Michelle DeRosa. Michelle, why don't you take away, bring up our topic that we're doing today?
Yeah. Well, it's summer, which comes with a lot of things, and we were thinking about talking today about just some common summer stressors from both like the mental health side of things. I was also thinking that we would talk a little bit about like the health side of things too, and how that plays upon the mental health side for not just the service dogs themselves, but service dog handlers. Because I don't know about you, Jennifer, but it is really, really hot where we are. And there is this heat dome that's coming in August, apparently. And like just this next week for July 4th is going to be like the heat index here is going to be like 110, which is crazy in Virginia. Um, and I think that's like the first thing our brain goes to when we talk about summer is like heat. But I kind of also wanted to talk about like just what summer means to everyone and like the stressors that come up. Maybe it's the heat, maybe it's other things, but that was kind of the thoughts here. So I can get us started with talking a little bit about like what I was inspired about this is the way that mental health plays off of or is impacted by stressors, first off. So, um, when our body is stressed, when our body is overwhelmed by various things, it causes a stress reaction, a stress response. Our adrenaline spikes, our cortisol level spikes. And for those of us who have chronic physical or mental health issues, that combination of increasing cortisol and adrenaline can do a lot on the way that we respond to things. It can do a lot for our bodies already, like eh, chronic illnesses that we might have. It can make them flare up pretty badly. One of the things that I found interesting in learning about mental health and just the seasons. I work in a university now, so I see a lot of this for the students. Is we think a lot of like seasonal affective disorder, but there's actually research that shows that mental health can become poorly or become worse in the summer, which is for some people who might have issues with mood disorders or just a depression slump where some people might feel like, what, it's summer, like get out, do stuff. There's a lot of people who do struggle with increased feelings of depression. There's a lot of triggers that happen in the summer. I don't know if that sparks anything for you, Jennifer. Not particularly the mental illness, but just what I've shared so far.
Yeah.
We can bounce off there.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was talking with one of my friends yesterday, and she was commenting on how I'm always more anxious and stressed this time of year.
Yeah. Mm,
And always can be like a little less patient. And I think it's because, yes, it's summer, and here in Seattle, today is actually a lot cooler, but we've been up
mm,
into the 80s and even 90s, which for us is extreme.
yeah.
Um, but there's also like this expectation from family of, are you going to take time? Are you going to go
Mhm.
on a vacation? There's going out and doing outside activities. In the
Yeah.
case of, like with helping with our nonprofit, there's always like different events and things going on, conferences.
Yeah.
So like yes, it's good that there's stuff going on, but it's a busy time of year with lots of juggling and lots of people having vacations. And so it was just sort of coincidental timing of, yeah, there's
Mhm.
good things going on, and that takes up my time and that adds stress.
Yeah, maybe that's where we can start is just the stress of like pressure. Because that's something that I definitely know a lot of people feel is there's so much going on, or and we've talked about this with the different holidays. So, like holiday stress or New Year stress, but there's a special type of stress that happens in the summer when there's a lot of expectations of going on vacations, getting together, different holidays. And that definitely can impact a lot for service dog handlers. So not only are we having to balance like our boundaries Do I feel like going out? It is really hot. Maybe we have heat intolerances. A lot of people who have mental health medication, it causes heat intolerance. So
Hmm.
maybe we're having to adjust our medication, and then it's already 90 plus degrees outside, and I'm being invited to go out, or my family's having a barbecue, or something's going on. I- how do we know when to have like a conversation about boundaries? How do we know when to have a graceful exit and to take care of ourselves when maybe our thresholds or our resiliency is kind of lowered? And is that okay? Like, do we have self-compassion for ourselves? And um, so yeah, I don't know if Jennifer, if you've ever had an experience, and I'm glad to share mine of like unexpectedly showing up somewhere and either noticing yourself or noticing your dog being affected by something specific to like summer, whether it be heat or just unexpected things that are happening that's very summer specific, and
Hmm.
how you handled it.
And definitely heat, and definitely I
Yeah.
think um for my dog, I think one of the times it was actually sort of surprising here where we live near the mountains is I remember hiking on a snowfield, but in the summer.
Wow.
And because it was very sunny, the snow is very reflective, so it's easy to get burned, and it's easy to get dehydrated.
Yeah.
And our dogs, this was a couple years ago, Theo, my service dog, and another dog were with us, and we realized they had gotten to a state of some sunstroke. Um, and we hadn't realized it at the time. That it's like, well, there's all this ice or snow around, but there's all this sun, and yes, they had had water, but they were also really struggling with the heat in a way that
Mm,
was not obvious. And the sun in a way that was not obvious. And so I think that was a big thing of just looking at like, okay, dogs can get heat stroke too.
yeah.
And to really be aware of just what are good limits for them. And I think, especially as a service dog handler, with these different summer events of like, what do I do? Do I not go at all? Do I not bring my dog? Do I bring my dog, but I bring this extra gear?
Hmm.
Um, but that's one time I can think of being really surprised of like, oh wow, I didn't do what was needed for my dog at the time. And it really was enlightening of okay, I really need to pay attention even in snow to
Yeah.
dehydration.
Yeah, I don't think I would have felt probably the same where I'm like, there's snow, like that's so it's cooling off. I don't think I would have even thought of the possibility of a heat stroke in a situation like that. Or even like, gosh, there's some times where I'm thinking, well, it's just 80 something, and then being surprised at how hot I quickly get. So imagining that my dog is getting even hotter very quick, much quicker. And I know that most people, especially service dog handlers, are very educated or are being educated about what we can do to protect our dog in the heat. So one of the things I think about is when we put our hand on the ground and see
Mhm.
like how hot that is. We bring water. We maybe use like cooling vests. But there's definitely like I think an experience for me where I feel like I tuckered out quicker than my dog did.
Yeah.
And that was a very like surprising and frustrating thing because you know when we're ready to go out, when you've got your dog together, you've got everything involved, and then you get there, and there may be for my experience, I was at a lake, and lakes tend to just I don't know, just expound or compound like a lot of things. Maybe if you are dehydrated, or you're doing things, or if you drink alcohol, like all of these things, just the heat makes it worse. And I remember feeling very frustrated just in general that I couldn't continue to hang out and spend time with my friends. And while, my service dog was fine and seemingly fine, I had to make that decision for myself that, all right, I'm going to have to call it early. And I think that's something that just as service dog handlers, we're used to like maybe being like, yep, okay, I need to go because my dog's not feeling well. But it's another thing with summer stressors that are, maybe some fear of missing out, some FOMO that's happening, or just our own comfortability that, hey, there's a lot of compound. Maybe if we have cold intolerance in the winter and we're able to understand that and like give ourselves grace. We could also should have some grace for ourselves in the summer and just be a little bit more as it sneaks up. I don't know if what it is about the heat for myself, but it really really does sneak up when we talk
Mhm.
about like heat stroke. I'm feeling all of a sudden like really strange or like I've been hydrating and like even something as warm or cool depending on where you're at as in the 80s can be dangerous for your dogs but also for yourself and the medications you might be on and then just emotions that come up. I'm feeling irritable, feeling overwhelmed easier, feeling emotional and making decisions or thoughts or things that maybe you haven't like triggers of things that you haven't experienced in a long time could be explained by the weather and giving yourself a time to slow down and pause and say okay what's going on, do I need to take a step away and then rejoin, or is this something that this is what I could call a day without calling it a failure? I think that's something when we talk about mental health is how we code or I use the term like how we choose to internalize an experience is really powerful to our brain. So in that moment where I'm like, ooh, okay, my dog's fine, having a blast at the lake. Meanwhile, I'm the one that's feeling really overwhelmed and dizzy. And now I'm not just feeling physically overwhelmed, now I'm feeling emotionally overwhelmed. And now I'm
Yep.
getting triggered by some things and all of these compounding. How I choose to internalize that. Is it a failure? Am I just doubling down there and then I leave, I might be less likely to go out again because I'm coining that as a bad experience versus okay, is this something that happened and I've learned, okay, like going into the lake for a couple hours, maybe we go a little bit less. Does that make sense, Jennifer, what I'm
It
saying
makes
with like how our
complete
brain, yeah.
sense. Yeah, of like, does your brain kind of lock this in as, oh, this was a negative experience. I don't ever want to repeat this versus, okay, how do
Hmm.
I manage the environment so that it is a positive experience?
Yeah.
Because people don't think about how draining sun is.
Yeah.
And just that reflection, how draining is on your eyes.
Yeah.
I'm a sailor. And so I
Mm.
spend time out on the water and in the sun. And anytime I come back, I am exhausted. And
Yeah.
even if it's just been for a few hours, I'm always more tired than were I even to go on a hike.
Yeah.
And realizing just that impact of the wind and the sun. And then also, if you're out in the summer, a lot of times things are more crowded, things
Yeah.
are busier and louder. And so it's just more overwhelming, areas where it might be kind of quiet when it's gray out are super, super
Mm.
busy in the summer. So yeah, I like your idea of, well, maybe it's like maybe you go to the lake earlier in the day when
Yeah.
it's a little cooler or there's not as much sun, or get more rest the night before, or plan some breaks. Like you might go to the water for a while, then come back and then see how you're doing and
Hmm.
then go back out again. So yeah, I really like that idea of reframing it as if, well, how do we help make this be a positive
Hmm.
versus just focusing on, okay, this one time was overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very difficult. We've talked about this with just the pressure that service dog handlers have to have an experience for the dog, but also ourselves to be a certain way, and that pressure that we put on ourselves. And it could probably, likely be compounded in these social situations that the summer brings. There's a lot more get-togethers. There's people bring their dogs to a lot more things
Mm-hmm.
in the summer. Um, and so it really puts us to the test. There's a lot more opportunities. I'm thinking of like going to, gosh, like carnivals, festivals, that just bring so many new experiences. Even if you have trained for as much experiences as you can, there's always going to be that one
Yep.
thing that comes up that, depending on how you handle it, like if it's like throws you completely off and it's like, oh, this was awful, or is like, whoa, I could have never prepared for that. And I think we did our best managing whatever came up, I think is really important. Something that helps me is like filing it under like it's a morally neutral decision to leave or to stay, what's best for me, instead of coining it or using language such as like it's a bad thing or I gave up, I quit, just using neutral language. And we've talked about that for like service dog training, the language that we used for our dogs, the language that you use. I think Jennifer, once there was and I think it might have been you, but the word even used of the like obedience or like command is
Mm,
all
right.
that language I
Versus
think your dog.
Q.
Yeah, yeah. matters, even how we talk to ourselves of like if we have to disengage from an event or something that's going on. Um,
That's a good
yeah.
point. I think we think a lot more about, like you mentioned, that like cue versus command, and
Mhm,
like those terms are like have meaning and emotion to me.
mhm.
And as I think about them with the relationship to what we expect of our dogs, but I
Yeah.
think like we don't necessarily give ourselves that same grace or put the
Yeah.
same, value on speaking to ways that are generous for ourselves or thoughtful for
Yeah.
ourselves.
When I look back at the early journey of like early service dog handling, there was just so much like pressure and the negative self-talk of like needing to get it right. What are other people going to think about me? Um, gosh, and going back, I think that would have been the, like younger me, older me. The thing I would want to remind myself and really practice is that self-talk and the biological feedback, the biofeedback that happens with the dog too. So if we're down on
Mhm.
ourselves or feeling stressed out, the dog is going to pick up on that and probably is going to be on a higher level. And maybe that's a part of the disability. It's a part of the mental health, like awareness is it's our first triggers of something that is going to be spiraling into like a post-traumatic reaction or some sort of response that causes repetitive actions that we want to limit, or our dog is trained to alert. And like while our dog is there to alert and help us so we can use our skills to come back down to a space, it sucks to be in that space.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm pretty like I think is a good thing to remind is that our service dogs are there to like let us know and be like, hey, did you notice this is happening? Hello, like, are you okay? But it's also like really good when we are able to slow it down and make it, and notice it for ourselves. It doesn't necessarily take away our service dog's job. It helps our service dog be doing our job or doing their job. um and
Yeah.
you go ahead, go ahead, I
No,
didn't want
good.
to cut you off.
No,
Well, not to shift topics, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we're having this conversation right before the 4th of July,
good point.
where, yeah, like even last night, there are fireworks that are going off in my neighborhood, and it is not anywhere near the weekend. Like, yeah, not anywhere near the
No.
weekend. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the impact of like fireworks and on dogs and even service dogs who might be really, really like my service dog training banjo is really great with fireworks. And yet, like there probably is some level of stress there. And then we can talk about how humans can be affected by unexpected loud noises and how to make
Hmm.
ourselves feel safe too. So
That's a
maybe
really
can
good
share
point.
about
Yeah,
that.
no, I think that's a great idea. And, yeah, kind of compounding that heat plus, and I think that's an area where that expectation or that pressure of people saying, oh, come out to the fireworks, where,
Yeah.
I hear like, oh, there's fireworks. I'm like, well, I just get frustrated because of how scared my animals are going to be,
Yeah.
how, like I am and yet there's this social pressure to enjoy those experiences. But for me, they have a lot of negative experiences,
Yeah.
just because of having animals that have been very scared of them.
Yeah.
And also similarly for people of just having those startling sounds. So
Mhm,
I do think, yeah, like making sure that people, even service dogs, that, you've got
mhm,
them safely secured, um,
mhm.
in your home, you know,
Yeah.
and
What are some good habits or some good preventatives for dogs or service dogs during this time where it is really unexpected? Like I said, last night there were fireworks going off, and that's just is going to continue and happen even when we least expect it. I'm not sure if you have any tips to share.
yeah, and it can depend on the dog a lot. Often with many of these things, if we've had a chance to decondition it when they were young, that we could slowly add in different noises and different startling things and positively condition that, that can really help. If, when a dog was young, you were able to hear a firework and you're like, yay, have a cookie.
Hmm.
Um, that, there's some dogs that do really well with that. There's others where it's like, it doesn't matter, ignore it. Different dogs learn different ways.
Hmm.
I find having some background music on, having other activities that you're doing, um, that are helping to distract. I know some people go out of town. I know one person that flat out goes
Hmm.
to Canada where there aren't fireworks on 4th of July, because
Oh,
her dogs get so stressed.
yeah.
Um, so I think just like looking at, would it be helpful for your dog, depending on the time, to have your veterinarian prescribe something that's sedating, like, that
Mhm.
you could use to help them sleep through it a little bit.
Yeah.
I know in my experience, it's the neighborhood ones versus the bigger city shows
Yeah.
that are more
Yeah.
troubling. They're closer, they're louder, they're less predictable.
They
So,
don't have a
just
time limit either. People just
mm-mm.
like continue it all night. Yeah.
So I think just like kind of being prepared of like, okay, I don't want to, make this a big scary thing for my animals. How do I prepare maybe with some medication, some background music, that might help with some distractions? One thing to realize is for a lot of animals, it's not just the sound, it's also the vibration.
Mhm.
And so, like, part of me is like, hey, my dog is now pretty much deaf.
Mhm.
Yay. But he still notices and feels when like jets go by, like when the
Yeah.
Blue Angels come by in our area, or can still feel the heavier fireworks. And so it's not just sound sensitivity, but definitely talking with your vet
Mhm.
and planning in advance, is a big one. If you can, planning that conditioning in advance from when they're young, and then having
Yeah.
other things to distract them and for them to do, not really
Yeah.
focusing on, oh my God, poor Fluffy, this is so scary. You don't want to build that up. Just like,
Yeah.
hey, this is cool. We're having fun. Life is good.
Yeah. Something that I just thought of, and it kind of ties in early, like what we just were talking about, is our mindset of like, if it does happen, if the dog does get scared, like it's not a failure. Um, it is it, and even for like, I was going to tie into the people side, it is a normal reaction to jump, to be startled when there is unexpected
Mm-hmm.
kabooms outside. That for anybody, for any creature on earth. I mean, you drop a stack of books next to someone, they're going to jump and startle, just because we know as humans that, oh, why is there, oh, it's 4th of July. Like, we're still going to get startled. We're still going to be activated. And so um, we might feel frustrated or worried or, oh no, our progress, or is this going, like, this is a normal reaction for a dog to have, just like we probably will feel activated or startled or scared, like when thunder is unexpected. And so there are plenty of demographics or plenty of people who might be have a exaggerated or a more sensitive startle response than other groups of people. So I'm thinking people who might have post-traumatic stress, PTSD, due to their trauma being correlated with an explosion or correlated with a loud noise.
Mm-hmm.
Fireworks can sound like all sorts of different things, like a car accident from a long way away. It could sound like explosions. It could sound like thunder. It can sound like a lot of things for a lot of different people. And furthermore, because just the startle response is the startle response, our body actually doesn't know when we get startled what it is that we're startled about. It just knows we're scared and we need to utilize that autonomic or automatic nervous system, which we probably have all heard of, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So most of the time, like a lot of people are going to startle and then they're going to have one of those responses. So it might be a freeze response, which is to kind of shut down and to feel really overwhelmed and to kind of lock up. And that can be really difficult when you have a service dog who might be reacting to that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're anxious or scared, but we're frozen and the service dog is upset, all of that. Or we might have um, a fight response, which is to be angry or frustrated. I'm not talking about we're just going to start punching walls, but some people might. But we might be a fight response of like, I got to act, I've got to do something.
Yep.
And our body is reacting. I know that kind of a funny, not funny, but funny memory when I was deconditioning Banjo when he was a baby is I got startled by thunder one night and I jumped up and I was like, "Yay, here's some cookies!" And I got in this like that was my like I guess fight response. I was like, "I gotta act," and Banjo was sleeping. He didn't even hear it, but because I jumped up and was like, thunder party. He was like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" And I realized like, okay, I've like my reaction of like startle because that was a really loud thunder. Actually ended up startling Banjo, who was totally fine before the the cookie party was happening. So, having some grace for ourselves of our startle response, or that startle response, that fight could be again that action of a huge spectrum there. Then we have the flight, which is very self-explanatory, which is to, it might feel like I've got to get out of here, I've got to leave. Maybe that's startling or a blend. And then we have like, there's something called a fawn response, which is kind of like go along with things. So maybe you feel really, really, really uncomfortable. Maybe you've gone to a fireworks show, or you're hanging out with friends and you're really, really, really uncomfortable, but you're just kind of like dissociated from your body, and you're like, yeah, this is fine, I'm all good, but inside you're building up all of those stress responses kind of going along with it, and that definitely takes a toll for our body, especially when we don't get to get away or do the things that, again, our body doesn't know. No, there's a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that can actually like make sense of things and know that it's a firework. We get it, the logic side, and then there is a part of our body, the brainstem part, the amygdala part, that just is speaking to our body in like sensory messages that doesn't know that we're not in danger until our brain starts to talk together. So big nerdy science lesson there. I don't know if you have any thoughts or want to add anything to that, Jennifer.
No, I think it's a good reminder to be patient with yourself. I
Yeah.
think it's a good reminder to try to, just like we try to set up the environment for our animals, to manage
Yeah.
that to be as safe as possible for them, to also do that for ourselves and to kind of give
Yeah.
that grace of what does that look like for you as an individual? Does that look like you go stay somewhere quiet outside of a city?
Yeah.
Does it look like you go into the middle of like city festivities to
Yeah.
avoid neighborhood ones? Do
Yeah.
you make sure you have a friend available? Are you having your dog do deep pressure therapy? Just kind of
Mhm.
pre-planning what will be good for you.
Yeah.
Um, I think is
Yeah.
an important one to kind of remember. We put a lot of
Absolutely.
energy at the dogs, but obviously keeping the dogs safe, right? Keeping them
Yeah.
away from, if there are fireworks, or if they're legal where someone is, to use in their neighborhood, making sure the animals are safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and empowering ourselves to do the same for us. So, like, just like you said, we take care of our dogs. So, giving ourselves grace to, do we need to put on earmuffs? Do we need to have deep pressure therapy blankets? Do we need to have music for ourselves, or to be putting on a comfort show? Remembering that these responses are morally neutral, talking to your clinician, your therapist, your care team. If you need some medication that, or to permission to take a different dose of medication during that time, especially if somebody is dealing with post traumatic stress. It is, and just general triggers, knowing that triggers don't mean that you slid back. There are plenty of times and plenty of reasons why our body are going to respond to triggers, and we're going to react, but we might react less severe or less immediate, or our cool down time or our time to get back online is shorter. And that's a victory. That's a huge victory. But it doesn't mean that if we are affected, that our goal should be to never be affected, because what we're being triggered by, and that connection our body remembers, it did happen. And most of the time people have this like, well, I just don't want to be triggered at all. And it's like, well, we're human. We have this like gift of reaction in our bodies. And so if we're trying to police these reactions, that's going to cause a lot of shame and guilt. But if our goal is to kind of soften the reactions, or to understand our reactions more, then ultimately our body and our brain is going to create a better, more positive. When I say better, I don't mean morally better, but a more positive, functioning response to that. Something that has a lot more of like acceptance than this discordant response. So, lots of permission for ourselves to, maybe if you do hear some illegal fireworks, to, if it feels like an appropriate response for you and your values, to call, to say to the non-emergency line, I'm just reporting some fireworks in my area, because I guarantee that you're not the only person in your area who is probably feeling startled, upset. I live in a military community, and my heart goes out to a lot of individuals in my community who, I know dread. this time of year, but probably might feel like they can't say that, or maybe just kind of feel like they have to go along with it. And we talk about the summer stress. This is like a huge time where people tend to just, and in the holidays too, go along with things, and then their body is taxed later by it. When maybe this is the year where you get to make like a new tradition or a new boundary for yourself, which is to, I like the idea of like going to Canada. Maybe not ever gonna go to Canada, but somewhere, or go do something for yourself. And sometimes the larger stressors can come down if we just acknowledge it and give ourselves self compassion and some consideration for ourselves. Um, Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's, oh, one of the things that I was just reminded today for dog safety is when there, if you think there might be fireworks, never ever let your dog out, even if they are cool with fireworks, but let them out without a leash or some kind of hold to them, even if
Yeah,
it's
definite.
like, if it's in a
Definitely.
fenced yard, well, your dog might jump the fence or dig under. Or if it's an electric fence, they might push through that. All of those things. So safety, and make sure it's not a collar that will easily slip over. So something like a harness while you're taking them to bathroom breaks during this time.
Yeah, no, that's really important. That this is one of the times of years where more dogs go missing than any other time. I was just looking at some stats. I think it's one of the busiest nights of the year at
Yeah,
animal shelters because it's just animals are scared and they take off when otherwise they might not. Um, so I think that's worth being just extra safe.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think you mentioned this a little with heat too, of just
Mhm.
recognizing we're in these conditions of unusually hot times,
Yeah.
and just remembering how quickly temperature rises in closed spaces like cars.
Mm-mm.
Being really careful and cognizant of walking and how warm the pavement can be.
Yeah.
And depending on your dog, and their age. My dog is older now, so he pants heavily anyway. And his
Hmm.
body doesn't regulate temperature as well. It doesn't cool down as well because he's older. And so I need to be aware of that, of like, okay, he's going to tire even more quickly, and looking at where ways I can walk him where he does not have to be on pavement or concrete at all, or using boots or things like that. And I don't live in an area that's anywhere near as hot as what you're experiencing. Um, but just being conscious of even a 90-degree day here, it's like there was fresh black asphalt that was just put down in an area where I
Mhm.
commonly walk. So I'm like, well, how am I, it's literally looking at like, where am I going to walk Theo instead?
Yeah.
um to just be cognizant of that.
Right. Yeah, what you're saying really reminds me of just how disruptive our routines get with these big changes. Changing the time that you walk your dog
That's a
might be
good
really
one.
disruptive. Changing the time where you feed my one of, yeah, Banjo, he doesn't like to eat when it's too hot, which is like, I don't know, it's just a whole routine change. Everything is disrupted. Um, when you play with your dog, when you might go out and go for a walk, a mental health walk or otherwise, the things we eat, the things that it's like lighter longer. So our circadian rhythm gets changed. So there's a lot of disruptiveness to our routines. And I think about our neurodiverse friends, our friends who might have like autism or just patterns, and a routine is extremely important. This can be a very, very difficult time. So when we talk about that resiliency, like maybe something that's normally like, I'll use like a scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being the highest distress ever, and zero being like, meh, no big deal. Maybe some people find things like a 4 or a 5 when it's a, you have your routine and everything, but something gets changed. It is extremely hot day. And so you can't go outside for very long, or your AC is broken, or something is going on and you're having to kind of move your routine. that level of distress that you might be feeling just on a base level and your resiliency lowers, it might spike up higher for various areas and for dogs too. Dogs get irritable, dogs get frustrated, dogs get tired and hot. And I'm thinking about once I took Sam to work and it was just really warm all throughout the workday. And I was going to go out afterwards, but we ended up going home because I just could tell. I mean, he was walking slower than normal and just beat, just beat. And it wouldn't have been fair to Sam to make him just kind of not make him, but like he would have done it happily. But noticing your dog's patterns and your dog's routines can be disrupted just like ours, and that does put like an impact on our routines. So for those of us, routines are very, very important. I encourage seasonal routines versus just I do ABC every day, because man, does it really get frustrating when a lot of like ABC doesn't happen for whatever reason. And it might happen 9 times out of 10 if you live a very specific life, but there's the weather that we can't control. There's a lot of things. So some seasonal routines could look just adjusted, moving your walk later, or maybe having more inside time of doing um, enrichment activities, something that I mentioned Banjo doesn't like to eat when he's hot. So what I usually have to do to get his appetite going, and it's not that we're hot in here, I just think he like, I don't know, it's a seasonal thing. I have to like do more food games to get his appetite going, and then he'll eat, which is time that I might not be anticipating to do before work or after work before this. So, um, yeah, I don't know if there's any routines that you find, Jennifer, that get adjusted in the summer that others might feel some kind of way about as well.
A good point. I think the longer days and the difference of
Yeah.
when is it light and dark, you can end up getting less sleep in the summer
Mhm.
because there's more light. It's easier to
Mhm.
stay awake longer, and not getting as much sleep as you need. Um, so I like that idea of seasonal routines.
Yeah.
I think a different aspect of that too is recognizing that, especially right now where there's a lot of unfortunate societal focus on, is that a fake service dog, and do you need that,
Uh,
service dog that people may feel judged, or they may judge of like, well, if your dog is out playing on the beach, do you really need them as a service dog?
yeah.
And these are, times when we can actually really let our dogs have this joy and
Yeah.
share this time with them outside and experience that. And I know there's people that deal with a lot of conflict there.
Mm.
And so I think this is another important time to like give yourself grace of like, this is part of your dog's well-being and health. This is part of your well-being and health to be able to be out there and do things with them that you both enjoy.
Yeah.
Or to potentially decide, I'm not bringing them. Maybe you're going to a roller coaster. You're
Mhm.
doing something that, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you don't need your dog. It just means you don't need them at that moment. And you have made a personal choice of what do you want to do and what's safe for you and safe for your dog.
Mhm.
It doesn't change your medical diagnosis or needs in any way. And it's really okay. And I think that's an area where people really feel that pressure of maybe there is a routine that they had that, well, it's not safe to do in the summer. Maybe they used to go do a walk at a certain time of day and now it's too hot. Um, so it could be shifting that to just, yeah, moving time of day, just shifting those kind of expectations on yourself, but also giving room of like, hey, it's okay if we're not training today and instead we're out just sitting in a park in the shade reading a book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, the being able to have like grace for yourself and changing, like maybe, yeah, maybe we're not doing training, and knowing that progress doesn't necessarily just go backwards. We can build upon like that anchor there. Um, yeah, for ourselves and for the dog. I totally agree with that. I had something and then it totally like dropped out of my brain. So maybe it'll come back here in a second. But I'm trying to think. I suppose we can, not everyone, I mean, most people do know, but maybe not everyone knows the signs of heat stress in dogs. Just a good reminder for somebody who might be listening who might know the blatant signs or maybe know in humans, but might not know in dogs. So I don't know if you, I know a few, but you probably know. mm,
I mean, some obvious ones are, panting. The
Yeah.
dog is panting when they're not otherwise tired. Um, it can be being lethargic
Mm-hmm.
is a big one. It can be sort of not wanting to move, avoiding things. Ironically, when an animal gets more dehydrated, they're not necessarily going to try to drink a lot
Hmm.
sometimes. So it could
Hmm.
be not drinking water.
Yeah.
Um, so having like moist food they can eat instead. Um,
Mm.
things that will get them some hydration if they're, too busy panting to want to drink.
Yeah.
Um, or overheated and not drinking, that actually can be kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Watching for just like, are they lifting their paws?
Mm.
Because things are hot. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and it's a couple for me that I've been watchful for is like the panting looks different than a normal panting. So like
mhm.
big open mouth and like
Yep.
heavy breathing. The tongue has like a spoon shape is what I've heard
Hmm.
before. That's very
Yep.
obvious when you see it. Um in I yeah, it's just like very obvious. The gums being like blue if they're not being able to breathe in faster or just like really, really inflamed. I always check the ears once they've come in and trying to calm down. Are the ears still hot? Like what's their body temperature? And while we're not vets, I do think it's important to like have understanding or look up the signs of like what to do if your dog gets overheated, which is to make sure that they cool them down. We don't put I think like I saw we don't want to put anything on them because that'll create this so like wetting down a towel and putting on them, we think that's going to help cool down, but actually it's making it insulated layer. So while like rinsing off maybe underneath in the belly with cold water would be fine, putting that insulated layer is not a good thing. And then like watching how much water they're drinking but I'm not a vet, so make sure if you have any
Yeah.
questions to like ask your vet, or look to vet education sites or purposes there. And always, always, if you ever have any questions or concern, is just much more safe to go to your nearest emergency vet, or call your emergency vet. Or if you have pet insurance, call the pet insurance line. They sometimes will have like depending on your pet insurance, like a vet line to be able to ask questions about.
And this could also be a time that for handlers whose dogs do psychiatric tasks or dogs
Yeah.
that do tasks where they're close to your body, you may find that they aren't there or aren't wanting to be there as
Yeah.
much. And for some people, that can be triggering. They can take that personally and be like, well, my dog doesn't like me, or my dog isn't doing the task they've been trained to do. And it's very similar to a dog who's doing psychiatric tasks. If the person is really having a meltdown or a hard time, that it can
Mm.
stress the dog. Similarly, they just may be hot. And so
Yeah.
their capacity to do deep pressure therapy or to be against your body at night, like while you're sleeping, may be limited. They may choose, I want to go lay down on that cold floor,
Mm.
and need that. And so remembering to give them room to make those choices and to not internalize it as either my dog is upset with me or doesn't love me,
Mm.
or that your dog doesn't know what they're supposed to do. They are making choices to for their well-being, and it's really important to allow that,
Yeah.
and to give room for that, and to not like interpret it as more than just my dog is hot and
Yeah.
they're meeting their needs.
That's so important. It goes back to like how are we internalizing things? And yeah, yeah, the dog is communicating, and it doesn't mean that the communication is this like personal, I don't like you, but that, there's something going on there. And yeah, I don't want to be near people and things when I'm hot. I imagine absolutely for dogs, they have higher body temperatures. I did remember what I was going to say, which is you were talking about like the pressure of like, oh, if you don't need your service dog, and just the pressure from other people of what a service dog should look like. Um, there are like I think about like you're taking your dog out and there's like restaurants that offer water or things like that. And I've heard discourse like, no, you absolutely like do not accept that. Do not allow your dog to drink water when they're working. And then we're thinking about like we're having record breaking temperature waves, and does a dog you allowing your dog to break and drink this water while it's tucked under the table? That really like I'm sure people might have lots of feelings about that, but if we're putting a lot of rigidity on like what a real service dog versus like it's not a robot, like if you just walk the
Exactly.
half a mile to get to this restaurant and they're offering water, um yeah, like that might be a
Yeah,
hot take, but like it's not a robot. And looking at what are stressors and feelings of pressure of like a perfect dog or a dog that doesn't need a break or maybe need water, um, or has to be with you all the time, has to go to that concert, has to go to that theme park when maybe like the dog's giving signs that that's too warm or gosh, if you wouldn't bring like a child to go the whole day without breaks, that's a lot to expect an animal who can't say
yeah.
as clearly as a child, I'm hot and I want to take a break.
That's a good point. And I think bringing to me when a restaurant offers me water, like I'm
Yeah.
always like, grateful and thankful. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you're welcoming my dog. It'd be one thing if you had it on the table or we're
Right.
doing something, but if it's on the floor
Yeah.
and not obtrusive and out of the way,
Yeah.
I think it's a real kindness of places accepting that a service dog is welcome.
Yeah.
And so I usually encourage it. If people offer that, I'm very thankful and grateful. Then I make sure it's somewhere unobtrusive and out of the way that my dog can reach, um,
Mhm.
while sort of staying within the zone of where I want them to be. So
Yeah.
I don't see any conflict at all of having your dog have their needs met. And I always make sure, you want to have water with you, like portable water
Yeah.
bowls, something to drink from. I think that's super important, especially at these hot times, to give them those breaks and more breaks.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
nothing about the American with Disabilities Act says, it says a dog needs to be well mannered in public, um, potty trained under what control. It doesn't say they aren't allowed to drink water. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it's, important to remember that's just a normal, good function, important thing to give our animals. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I know when, gosh, it'd probably be like 8 years ago or so, a big thing on social media circles is lots of gear, and gear can be really, really cool and very, very helpful. So, like booties and visors and all sorts of things. But no, this is, I guess, more my opinion, but know that it's some dogs just don't want to wear gear, don't work well with gear. You might not want the gear, and
mhm.
that is okay. Um, but knowing to take precautions, if booties are, if you're not going to be wearing booties but you're going to be walking on a hot pavement, making sure that you're going in the shade or on the grass, or maybe you go at a different time.
Yeah.
Same as like the visors. I'm not sure if you've seen like like dogs
Oh
that are
yeah,
just like they're
doggles.
decked out. Yeah, goggles for dogs. Those are really cool. It could be really great for like the reflection. And does every service dog need to be able to tolerate that and use that? Probably not,
No.
depending on what that dog is being trained for. So, checking our own feelings of pressure about what we see online, um, in the summertime, all the different gear. Can those be amazing things to just have backup, or maybe fun to do, or if it's providing the dog comfort, awesome. But yeah, like
And it
checking what.
also and it can be
Yeah,
expensive. And I
yeah,
think one thing to remind people is like, to not necessarily feel pressure that you have to go out and buy all the fancy
yeah.
gear. Like you can, one thing that I like as a nice trick is just having a bandana, a human bandana. You
Mm,
can dip it
yeah,
in your water bottle, roll it off, and wrap it around the
yeah,
dog's neck, just like you would around
yeah,
your own. And then
yeah.
refresh that. That can be really nice and cooling, and you don't have to buy high-tech gear to have that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And the thing about the booties too is like dogs perspire through their feet. I don't know. Or they at least like they like get their
yeah, they
feet.
do.
Yeah, so I always love seeing like Samson's paw prints on like the tile floor or whatever where we would be at, and he would move and his little paw like pad just steam print there. If we were booties all the time indoors and everything like that, then they're not able to get and express that heat too. So keeping that in mind as well. Yeah,
Yep. No,
we
that's a
covered
really
a
good
lot.
point. Yeah. So, I think it is interesting to just kind of step back and recognize like most people think, oh, it's sunny and nice out, we should be happy. But recognizing it is a different season. And for some people, especially that have orthostatic conditions,
Yes.
heat can be really dangerous, or migraines. The bright sunlight can be really hard.
Yes.
Um, One of my best friends does not do well here when it's sunny or when it's warm. Her vertigo and migraines are just awful.
Yeah.
And so kind of recognizing that honor irony of depending on the condition, that, or yeah, and I think a lot of that's just pressure and the busyness.
Yeah.
So I think kind of giving ourselves that grace of like, people understand, oh, it's winter, it's gray, somebody might be feeling down, but I don't
Hmm.
think society gives as much grace to, oh, it's hot and sunny. Other
Yeah.
than feeling lethargic, I don't think
Yeah.
people give as much grace to kind of a
Yeah.
mental health side. And so I really, like that you brought that up in the first place. And I
Yeah.
think it's something that, people may not really realize is even a thing.
Yeah. Yep. Mood disorders tend to pick up in the spring with the season changes and the summer. There can be people who have polar depression in the summer versus seasonal affective disorders. So, and it could be really isolating and confusing for someone to look around and everyone is, yes, having that rhetoric like, oh, finally, my seasonal depression is over, and be like, oh, well, what is this? Like mine, I feel like mine just began, or just different things that happen in the summer that uh, cause activating or triggering events because your medical um, chronic illnesses are flaring up, and that absolutely can put our headspace into some depression or anxiety, some cycles there. So yeah, I'm glad that that's something that I was very interested to do some trainings on that, and I think it's just a good thing to keep in mind.
Great. Well, we haven't had any comments, but we know most people will watch these after the fact. Um, so I don't know that I had anything else to add right now, other than just people remember to use your networks, remember to, help your dog, but also that your dog is there to help you,
Hmm.
too. But I think just giving everybody a little more grace in this season, and
Hmm.
especially as it's just very hot in
Hmm.
many, many places and dangerously hot
And humid, yeah, very
in
humid.
many, many places, to just be careful and not push your dog, not push yourself too hard, and to really, hydrate. And remember that ways of doing that with dogs can include ice cubes or,
Mhm.
frozen Kongs, things like that, that they will get cooling and they will get moisture in addition to water that can really help bring down that core temperature.
Yeah. And for us, being, adjusting what you need for this heat. So maybe going out isn't going to be acceptable. So having it's too hot and maybe it's hot in your house, going into a room that's cooler, doing some low energy things can be really restorative. Shifting our brain from I have to be productive and use this time to I am taking care of my body, and that is productive. Or maybe shifting from the productive mindset that just you deserve to be. You deserve to do what you need to do to make your body feel taken care of. And it doesn't have to have a specific label or outcome other than taking care of yourself.
Like that.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining me and sharing this
Thanks.
conversation. I always look forward to these.
Yeah.
So this will be available on our YouTube channel, and on our website. There's a link to these to rewatch. So thank you all. If anybody has other ideas for helpful topics for these, we do them once a month. Please, you can reach out to info@atlasdog.org and just say you have Mental Health Monday ideas, and um, we'll be sure to follow up.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Let me